One of the central foreign policy areas where Anthony Albanese has made the wrong call and broken with the United States is over support for Israel. Albanese and Foreign Minister Penny Wong have changed Australia's stance at the United Nations, where we used to mainly vote with Israel and the US on the many motions condemning Israel. Now Australia has started voting against the US and Israeli position, and we've even recognised the non-existent state of Palestine, which is exactly why I found these comments from Albanese full of chutzpah.
I did speak with the Secretary about the Gaza peace plan and how it's rolling out. I'm not in a position to go into that detail for obvious reasons, but we're very supportive of the role that the United States is playing there.
Fancy that, hey? Albanese now supports the US and Israeli peace plan as if he was behind them all along. Only they forced Hamas to surrender because they kept going after Hamas, and all the while Albanese criticised those efforts. For month after month after month, Albanese and Wong called for ceasefires. And if they'd been heeded, those calls, when they were made, Yahya Sinwar would still be running a massive Hamas terrorist army in Gaza, armed to the teeth, terrorising Gazans and threatening Israel. Hezbollah terrorists and their armoury would still be terrorising Israel from the north. And Iran would not only still be firing missiles at Israel and supporting Hamas, but it might have had nuclear weapons by now. On Middle East policy, Albanese should have taken a leaf out of Kevin Rudd's book and apologised for getting it so horribly wrong. And just on this war, I want to share with you a longish section of comments made by a former Middle East-based journalist. This is Matt Friedman, a former Associated Press journalist, and it's from an event held a few months back that I've just caught up on. But it's a brilliant expose of what I've been telling you for the past 2 years, and that is that most of the media coverage of the Gaza conflict that you see is just Hamas propaganda.
As far as I know, I was the first staffer to erase information from a story because we were threatened by Hamas, which happened at the very end of 2008. We had a great reporter in Gaza, a Palestinian, who had always been really an excellent reporter. We had a detail in a story. The detail was a crucial one. It was that Hamas fighters were dressed as civilians and were being counted as civilians in the death toll. An important thing to know, that went out in an AP story. The reporter called me a few hours later. It was clear that someone had spoken to him. And he told me, I was on the desk in Jerusalem, so I was kind of writing the story from the main bureau in Jerusalem. And he said, Mati, you have to take that detail out of the story. And it was clear that someone had threatened him. I took the detail out of the story. I suggested to our editors that we note in an editor's note that we were now complying with Hamas censorship. I was overruled. And from that point in time, the AP, like all of its sister organizations, collaborates with Hamas censorship in Gaza. What does that mean? You'll see a lot of dead civilians and you won't see dead militants. You won't have a clear idea of what the Hamas military strategy is. And this is the kicker, the center of the coverage will be a number, a casualty number that is provided to the press by something called the Gaza Health Ministry, which is Hamas. And we've been doing that since 2008. And it's a way of basically settling the story before you get into any other information. Because when you put, when you say 50 Palestinians were killed and 1 Israeli on a given day, it doesn't matter what else you say. The numbers kind of tell their own story, and it's a way of kind of settling the story with something that sounds like a concrete statistic, and the statistic is being, given to us by one of the combatant sides. But because the reporters sympathize with that side, they're happy to play along. So since 2008, certainly since 2014, when we had another serious war in Gaza, the press has not been covering in Gaza. The press has been essentially an amplifier for one of the most poisonous ideologies on earth. Hamas has figured out how to make the press amplify its messaging rather than covering Hamas. There are no Western reporters in Gaza. All of the reporters in Gaza are Palestinians, and those people fall into 3 categories. Some of them identify with Hamas. Some of them are intimidated by Hamas and won't cross Hamas, which makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't want to cross Hamas either. And the third category is people who actually belong to Hamas. That's where the information from Gaza is coming from. And if you're credulous, then of course you're going to get a story that makes Israel look pretty bad.
Now, that's a brilliant and practical insight there from someone at the coalface. The media has much to answer for over this conflict, how it's been covered and how that has impacted on anti-Semitism and political responses around the world. And mark my words, most media will fiercely resist any accountability on this.